We are in this morning the chapter of Luke chapter 20 verse 9 and reading through 19, and then go back into the Old Testament to Isaiah 8 verses 13 through 17. Then he began to tell the people this parable. A certain man planted a vineyard, leased it to the vine dressers, and then went into a far country for a long time. Now, at the vintage time, he sent a servant to the vine dressers that they might give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the vine dressers beat him and sent him away empty-handed. So again he sent another servant, and they beat him also. And they treated him shamefully and sent him away empty-handed. And again he sent a third, and they wounded him and cast him out. Then the owner of the vineyard said, "What shall I do? I know I will send my beloved son. Probably they will respect him when they see him." But when the vine dressers saw him, they reasoned among themselves, saying, "This is the heir. Come on, let's kill him, and then the inheritance will be ours." And so they cast him out of the vineyard and killed him. Therefore, what will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and destroy those vine dressers and give the vineyard to others. When they heard it, they said, "Certainly not." Then he looked at them and said, "What then is this that is written? The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. Whoever falls on that stone will be broken, but on whomever it falls, it will grind him to powder." Now the chief priests and the scribes that very hour sought to lay hands on him, but they were afraid of the people, for they knew that he had spoken this parable against them. So the reference he makes here is to a passage in Isaiah. So we are in Isaiah chapter 8, looking at verses 13 through 17. Isaiah chapter 8, starting with 13. "The Lord Almighty is the one you are to regard as holy. He is the one you are to fear. He is the one you are to dread. He will be a holy place for both Israel and Judah, and he will be a stone that causes people to stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. And for the people of Jerusalem, he will be a trap and a snare. Many of them will stumble. They will fall and be broken. They will be snared and captured. Bind up this testimony of warning and seal up God's instructions among my disciples. I will wait for the Lord, who is hiding his face from the descendants of Jacob. I will put my trust in him." In what do you put your trust this morning? Are you trusting in the cornerstone? Are you trusting in Jesus? Or have you placed your trust in something else? When I was in junior high, we lived in California for a year, and I went to a junior high school out there. And one of the things we studied that year was the architect Frank Lloyd Wright. And we looked around at different buildings, and they tried to tell us where we could see what Frank Lloyd Wright had done and what kind of things he had built. So this architect was given the challenge of building the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo. This was one of the most earthquake-prone cities in the world. So Wright's investigation showed that a solid foundation could be floated on a 60-foot layer of soft mud underlying the hotel. And so that's how he built it. This provided a shock-absorbing but solid support for the immense building that was the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo. Now, shortly after the hotel was completed, Tokyo experienced one of the worst earthquakes in their 52 years that had ever been. And when lesser buildings all around that Imperial Hotel fell and were in ruins, there Frank Lloyd Wright's building, the Imperial Hotel, stood because of the foundation that was under it. Usually, you and I don't think about mud as being a good foundation material. We like to look for solid ground, for some solid thing that we can build on that we know isn't going to give up. But he looked and found a way to use mud to make it absorb the shock of the earthquake and for that building to stand. So Jesus asked that day, what do you place your trust in? What is your foundation? He looked at them in verse 17 and said, it is written, the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. Whoever falls on that stone will be broken, but whomever it falls on, it will grind him to powder. And the chief priests and the scribes got really, really, really angry with him. And they wanted at that point to capture him and take him to court and get rid of him. But they were a little afraid of the crowd around that wanted to hear what he had to say because they were so impressed by this man who spoke truth that they could understand, in a way that they could understand. And they knew that the parable was about them. Jesus describes himself as the chief cornerstone. I thought about that for a while, and I thought, do we really understand what the cornerstone is? In our day, we often think about it, there's two definitions for cornerstone. One is a stone that forms part of the corner of a building. It's a foundation stone that is often inscribed with when the building was built and who the builder was or the architect. And it was laid, and then there was a big ceremony marking the beginning of the building. But the other meaning, the second meaning, is that a cornerstone is the basic, the essential, the most important part, the foundation. So the cornerstone of something is the part of it which is, because it's there, because it exists, because it's successful in what it's doing, the building is be able to stand and to remain standing. So we see Jesus Christ describes himself as the cornerstone, which means that he's the foundation. He's the measuring guide. He is the promise of God to his creation that will uphold us and make us the people we are to be. He is the light that guides us to a straight path whenever we would otherwise be lost in the darkness of this world. Jesus does a lot of his teaching by using parables. The parable is a story with a hidden meaning, and it was used to him to be able to speak to his disciples and for them to understand important truths and for them to be able to remember those truths. He was teaching them something, and he used a story so that they could remember what he was teaching. One day, as he was teaching in the temple courts, the chief priests and teachers of the laws and the elders gathered around and asked him a question about his authority. They really hoped to trap him into saying something that they could use against him, but the people were so interested to hear what he is teaching that they gathered in and listened closely to see what he would say. And so, rather than answering the question about the authority, Jesus told them a parable. A man planted a vineyard, and then he rented it to some farmers to take care of it. And then he went away a long way and left them to take care of the vineyard. When harvest time came around, he said, you know what? I bet they have some good wine. I bet they have some good grapes. I think I ought to have part of the harvest. And so he sent one of his servants out to collect. The farmers beat that servant and sent him away empty-handed. And so he sent another servant, and they beat him and sent him away with nothing. And then he sent a third man, and they wounded him and threw him out of the vineyard. And the owner said to himself, what on earth can I do? I really think that I should have part of the harvest. It is, after all, my vineyard. I know. I will send my son, and they should have respect for him because he's my son. Yes, this will work. I'll send my son. They will respect him. They will give him part of the harvest, and we can enjoy it. But the farmers saw the man coming, and they said, wait a minute, I recognize this guy. This is the heir. This is the son. This is the one that will inherit. Let's kill him. If we kill him, then we can keep the vineyard. There will be no one to inherit. And so they killed the son and threw his body out of the vineyard. The people hearing this story said, what a terrible thing to do. How could they do that? Why didn't they just send the man what he asked? A couple of grapes, a basket of grapes, some wine? Why couldn't they do that? Why would they actually beat the servants and send them back and then kill his son? And as they tried to figure out what on earth he was talking about, the scribes and the Pharisees and the elders knew exactly what he was talking about. They knew that the prophets had been beaten. They had been put out of the churches. That they didn't want to hear the prophets. They didn't listen to them down through the time and through centuries. And then when Jesus came, they knew that he would die. So Jesus quoted to them from the scripture. He quoted from Psalm 118:22 and then from Isaiah 8:14 and 15. So in Psalm 18:22, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Open for me the gates of the righteous. I will enter and give thanks to the Lord. This is the gate of the Lord through which the righteous may enter. I will give you thanks, for you answered me and became my salvation. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this in this very day, so let us rejoice and be glad. The teachers of the law and the chief priests and the elders became angry. They knew that he was speaking about them, but they also knew that the people loved Jesus, that they couldn't get enough of his teaching, that he made things so clear and so plain and so easy for them to understand. And so they knew the time was not yet. The Jews have a legend based on this statement of the psalmist. And according to that legend, when the Temple of Solomon was being built, the masons sent up from the quarry below a stone, different in size and shape from all the rest that they were sending up. The builders looked at that stone and they said, we don't have any place for this stone. This has got to be some kind of a mistake. And so they rolled the stone over the edge of the cliff into the valley of Kidron, below the temple area. As time went on, for the temple was 7 years in the building, they finally got to the place that they were ready for the cornerstone. So when they asked the workers, where's the cornerstone? The workers said, why, we sent that up to you a long time ago. One of the workmen said, oh, I remember. That stone, altogether different from the rest, and we thought there was no place for it, so we rolled it down to the valley below. So then the men had to go and leave their place and go down into the valley and to begin to look until they found the cornerstone. They succeeded in doing so, and when the stone was brought up, it fit perfectly into its place. It was the headstone of the cornerstone. Jesus was rejected by the religious leaders of his day. Is he rejected by us as well? Do we really believe that he is the cornerstone? And do we base our lives on that fact, that he is the foundation, he is the Savior, he is the one who we can build our life on? One day, the Jews will realize that the stone that they rejected and crucified on Calvary, is the cornerstone of the world. One day, but not this day. The Lord Almighty is the one you are to regard as holy. He's the one you are to fear. He's the one you are to dread. He will be a holy place for both Israel and Judah, but for both Israel and Judah, he will be a stone that causes people to stumble and a rock that makes them fall. And for the people of Jerusalem, he will be a trap and a snare. Many of them will stumble. They will fall and be broken. They will be snared and captured. Bind up this testimony of warning and seal up God's instructions among my disciples. I will wait for the Lord, who is hiding his face from the descendants of Jacob. I will put my trust in him. Warren Wilsby tells a story of when he was a young man preaching on the last days about all the events of prophecy, clearly laid out, perfectly planned. And so he made his sermon, he made his talk, he did his pitch, and he talked about end times, and you can expect this, and then this, and then this. At the end of the service, an older gentleman came up to him and whispered in his ear. And this is what he said. I used to have the Lord's return planned out to the last detail in my mind. But years ago, he said, I moved from the planning committee to the welcoming committee. Are you and I part of the welcoming committee? Are we looking for the return of the cornerstone, where he will come again, just as he has promised?